Ronald Reagan did many great things for the United States. He was a man who spoke out in what he believed in. Ronald Reagan had a large impact on the destruction of the Berlin Wall. His actions ended up making a very important change in history. Many people say that he was one of, if not, the greatest president the United States has ever had. Ronald Reagan's speech in front of the Brandenburg Gate on June 12, 1987, challenged Mikhail Gorbachev to tear down the Berlin Wall that separated East and West Germany. In this speech, he said, "Secretary General Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall."
It was the end of World War II. For some people, this was a time of peace, but for others, it was a time of distress. Like many people say, one problem leads to another, and this was a perfect example. Germany was still recovering from the war and having many issues. Back in 1933, Berlin was named the capital of Adolf Hitler's Nazi state. But by the end of World War II, Nazi Germany was destroyed. The country had been split into 4 Allied occupation zones by 1945 following the defeat of Nazi Germany. These 4 sections were the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, the United States, and France. Berlin itself was divided into different sectors even though it was part of the Soviet Union. Tensions grew in 1948 when the United States, France, and the United Kingdom made a movement to bring together and unite their occupation zones into one. They would call it the Federal Republic of Germany. The Soviet Union responded by blockading Berlin beginning in June of that same year. Even though it was very chaotic, the Western powers were able to successfully supply the 3 sections of Berlin with food and fuel in the Berlin airlift. This forced the lifting and defeat of the Soviet blockade in May of 1949.
1961. The Cold War began, greatly affecting the lives of the people of Germany. Many East Berliners were tired of living under the communist lifestyle. They began to travel to West Berlin where they could live democratically. This political issue upset and even angered many citizens. Millions of East Berliners attempted to flee to West Berlin. They packed their bags and began their travels. Around 2.5 million successfully made it into their new home. The number of people moving to West Berlin each day was astounding. Approximately 3,000 travelers would enter into the West each day. This was a win for the East Berliners. They could finally live the fair, democratic life they had wished for. While many newcomers were overjoyed, the original West Berliners who had lived there for years became crowded. Their space was being inhabited by more and more people every day. At this point, things became uncontrollable. Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev wanted East Germany to close off access between East and West Berlin to avoid this. It was embarrassing to the socialists and communists to see everyone leaving their land and moving to the democratic and capitalist way of life. East Berlin took this request into consideration. They didn't want all of their citizens fleeing to the west. So on the night of August 12, 1961, East German soldiers sprung into action. They placed more than 30 miles of barbed wire straight through the center of Berlin. This was set so that the citizens of East Berlin were unable to pass through into the west. The West was surprised by this, but they made no effort to prevent the boundaries. East Germans didn't hold back. They started blocking off checkpoints between East and West Berlin. Even though the East Berliners were prohibited from crossing the border, they tried to make it over anyway. East Germans wanted a better way to keep them out. So on August 15th, they began replacing barbed wire with concrete. Little did they know that that wall would become one of the most famous landmarks from all around the world.
During the building of the wall, many people protested. They would stay out at night, holding signs and spray painting the wall. They felt that it was unfair to them because the people before them were allowed to stay on the other side of the boundary. In the West, the Berlin Wall was thought of as an important symbol of communist oppression. More than 5,000 East Berliners managed to escape across the Berlin Wall to the west side. But as the wall continued to be built, higher and stronger, with more and more guards, many less attempts were successful. Thousands of East Germans were captured during attempted crossings, and 191 were killed. In June of 1987, President Ronald Reagan went to visit West Berlin. While he was there, he gave one of his most famous speeches right in front of the Berlin Wall. Reagan's "Tear Down This Wall" speech was his way of challenging Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev to destroy the wall. Reagan wanted the Germans to be able to unite as one, like they were before the wall was built. Reagan ended his speech by directly addressing Gorbachev and telling him to tear down the wall.
In November of 1989, the Cold War began to slowly disappear from the minds of Germans. Many people started to notice that East Berlin's relation with West Berlin has changed. Beginning at midnight on November 9, 1989, German soldiers let the people free to cross the country's borders. East and West Berliners moved to the wall immediately. Many were drinking beer and champagne and chanting for them to open the wall. At midnight, the Berliners flooded through the checkpoints. Over 2 million East Berliners visited West Berlin that weekend to participate in the celebration that was known as the greatest street party in the history of the world. The people used picks to break away parts of the wall. These people were known as wall woodpeckers. There were bulldozers coming from every direction and cranes lifting the wall apart. Once the wall was down, Berlin was united for the first time since 1945. The Berliners said that the war had ended that day, when the wall finally fell.
The reuniting of East and West Germany was called official on October 3, 1990, almost 1 year after the fall of the Berlin Wall. A once united country turned into a state of rivalry and captivity. The people of East and West Berlin could only hope that one day they would be reunited and see their fellow Germans as their companions. Ronald Reagan helped grant this wish for all the Berliners. Even to this day, Germany greatly thanks him for that.